I'm joined now by Hazel Moore, the co-founder of the investment bank First Capital, which invests in some of these fintech companies. Do you agree that it's going to be a really big, radical change over the next 20 years?
I really do. I think that in 20 years' time, banks may well not exist in the kind of form that we see them today. If you think about it, very many industries have been totally disrupted by the internet and by changing consumer behaviour. As the film said, Uber is the largest taxi company in the world. It has no taxis. Amazon is the largest retailer in the world. It has no shops. I think there's a very real possibility that the banking system will be totally
Jenkins
different.
did say, at the moment, all these apps and platforms, they all basically come back to banks, don't they? They all sort of use the banking system as the foundation of everything they're doing.
They do, and I think it's unlikely that we will see a wholesale replacement of the banking infrastructure, but there are regulations coming down the line, for example, that are going to force banks to open up this infrastructure to third parties. There's a directive called the Payment Services 2 directive that comes in 2018, which will force banks to open up their payment infrastructures, and therefore third parties will be able to offer services on top of that.
It'd be like OpenReach and broadband providers or something.
Absolutely, you know, and then the risk for banks is that they just become a utility infrastructure and their services are commoditized and all the value goes to the providers who may be new entrants putting services on top.
Now, a lot of people say it's great. Why pay the bank such a big margin if I can lend money to you directly because we've got some whizzy app that's going to match us up like apps match, you know, in the dating world. And a lot of this exists now. None of it has been stress tested. Now, banks most of the time are fine. It's only every 100 years that they have a horrible crisis and fall apart. And none of these other technologies have been stress tested. Are you confident that peer-to-peer lending, say, these platforms, that when everybody wants to get out, there isn't going to be a run on them and people are just going to find they can't get their money out because there isn't a kind of a big stock of capital, rainy day money sitting there as you have at a bank?
I think that's a valid concern, and I think one of the things that's really important to realise, for example, about peer-to-peer lending, it is not a substitute for a high-interest savings account. It's not something that you should invest in if you need your money in a hurry. It's a relatively sophisticated product and it carries higher risk. So it should only be part of, for example, a portfolio. However, if you think about it, in 2008, when the banking crisis started, it was almost impossible for small businesses to get loans. And what peer-to-peer lending, for example, allows is an alternative source of credit, which actually, in some respects, should there be an economic crisis, might actually provide more stability into the system because there's a different source of credit available for companies.
Am I right in thinking that Britain is a bit of a leader in this whole fintech area because we're not bad at tech and we're good at finance? Is that right?
Britain, and in particular London, has a fantastic opportunity in fintech to really take a global lead in what is a huge industry. In tech, clearly the Silicon Valley is the centre of major innovation, but Silicon Valley is not a financial centre. What we have in London and in the UK is an abundance of customers, an abundance of talent, an abundance of technology, and you put all of those three together and there's a real opportunity to develop some very, very important, very significant new businesses in London.
Hazel Moore, thanks very much for coming in.
Thanks. You.